evening and welcome to HOWC
Talk Radio.
This is Ken Grady, co-host of Gospel Music Today, and we're honored to be part of the gospel music programming brought to you by HOWC Productions Gospel. Check out Gospel Music Today for the latest news, guests, concert updates, and exclusive live gospel concerts from the world of Southern Gospel. HOWC Productions Gospel and Gospel Music Today, bringing families, communities, and churches together.
Radio coming to you from 231 6th Avenue down south here in the big city of Beatrice, Alabama. We are going to be doing some country and western HOWC radio gospel music today. Ken and Jean Grady, 2020. All right. Get to know Ken and Jean Grady. We're going to open up with an interview from Gospel Music Report. It runs about 40 minutes or so this week on Gospel Music Today. Also, we're going to be doing Doug Pitman and Zach Barham and the Down East Boys, the guests of Gospel Music Today for week June 28th. Ken and Jean Grady host Southern Gospel News, concerts, updates. The featured gospel groups is Battle Cry. Jean reviews their new record by Tim Menzies. An article from Christian Voice magazine is the subject of this week's news notes. The show features a new music video from the Nelons, exclusive concert video of the Regals, recorded by Gospel Music Today. Cameras is in Duncan, South Carolina, and visit to Gospel Music Today archives for exclusive video of Reborn, recorded by Gospel Music Today. Cameras in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. You can also check out the links to Gospel Music concerts and events as well. We're going to be getting that on that for you too, but let's get to the music and the interview of Ken and getting to know Ken and Jean Grady. Again, welcome. It's 9 o'clock here in the big city of Beatrice, Alabama, and we hope you are staying safe, you are wearing your mask, you're being smart about what you're doing, and let's enjoy some good information about Ken and Jean Grady. Again, welcome to HOWC Gospel, Blog Talk Radio. Enjoy the broadcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Gospel Music Report. Now, if you've not already noticed, this episode is a little different from the first, and that's because it's the introduction to an additional format I'm going to be implementing into the episode rotation. I've always intended to interview people, and as I can get to them, I'll be sprinkling them in here and there as schedules allow. These won't be written commentary pieces, but rather just simple discussions between myself and whoever I get to sit down with. Now, I've done my best to make it somewhat visually stimulating, but this was an over-the-phone interview, as I'm assuming most of them will be. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoy it. But before we jump in, I wanted to say thank you to all of you who liked, commented, and shared Episode 1 with your friends. I greatly appreciate the response and the feedback. Also, thank you very much to those who have graciously decided to support me on Patreon over at patreon.com/gospelmusicreport. You are the people who are going to keep this moving forward, and for that, I'm especially grateful. Ken and Jean Grady are the founders and hosts of the television show Gospel Music Today. Through the years, they've traveled and interviewed hundreds of artists while featuring just as many on their broadcast. And though today they're certainly no strangers to the gospel music world, this style of music was nowhere to be found in their background. In 1988, they were living separate lives in the town of Coventry, Rhode Island, where Ken was a school teacher and Jean was a director of music.
I'd become the director of the Patuxent Valley Community Chorus, which was a local community chorus in the town that we lived. And Ken was a school teacher. Our community chorus met at the school once a week, and he was a school teacher there. And also he was an advisor for the radio station at the high school. And so his kids provided the lights and sound for our shows. And it was through that I met him. And it just so happened that the president of the chorus said the first Christmas, he said, be sure you contact Ken Grady to do the lights and sound for your Christmas program. And I said, well, at that time I said, what does he do? Because I didn't know. And he said, well, he's a single guy. He's a school teacher right here. And I said, you know somebody that's single? I said, I needed a date for the Christmas program or to the Christmas party for work. And so this person became the matchmaker to try to get us together, and he had to work quite hard to do that. We would see one another on rehearsal nights, and it was the course of about 5 years before we got married, but we just dated during that 5 years, and so that's basically how we met, and he continued working with the chorus. He became the MC for our chorus programs, and still had the kids there that were doing the lights and sound for us. So that's how we met.
I personally assumed that Ken had always intended to be in broadcasting, but although he was familiar with radio, he actually went to college to become a school teacher. Later, I asked them both how they came to the decision to start their show, but at this time in Ken's life, it wouldn't be until nearly 20 years later when he and Jean would meet. However, someone else did have their eye on him.
As soon as I walked out of that college, the draft board had their eye on me. This was in the Vietnam era. So I started teaching, and then 8 weeks later got drafted. So so my actual broadcasting started at that point.
Because I knew that you had done broadcasting when you were in the military.
Right.
And I guess I just assumed that you had trained for that purpose, but that's just something that sort of fell into your lap.
Yeah, well, I had done college radio, and I had played in a band during college, so I was familiar with all the local disc jockeys in the Providence area, including the disc jockeys at what was the big station then, WPRO in Providence. So when I got drafted, I went through basic training, and I got sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and got trained as an artillery surveyor. That's the guy that sits up on top of the hill and directs which way the guns are supposed to fire. So they held me at the school after the school was done because I did very well in the school. They held me there and made me an instructor in the school for officers. So when I eventually got orders to go to Korea, by that time my pals there in the Army were captains and majors, and I said, what do I need to do? I don't want to go to Korea and sit on the 39th parallel directing guns in case there's a second Korean War breaks out. So they told me what to do. I got the guys at WPRO to write letters of recommendation saying what a great broadcaster I was. They had no clue. And when I got to Korea, they drop you in a big warehouse when they send you to a country and then distribute everybody out to where they're going to go. Well, I was still sitting there at the end of the week, so I went to the office and told the clerk in the office, who was even dumber than I was, I said, I think there's been a mistake. I'm still stuck here, and I think the problem is I was supposed to go to the American Forces Radio and Television, and I think maybe somebody lost my paperwork. So the kid picks up the phone and calls the American Forces Radio and Television headquarters in Seoul. There's a civilian in charge of it, and he has the paperwork that I sent him sitting on his desk when the clerk calls him. So the clerk explains what's going on. The civilian knows that the clerk is just some poor guy that got conned into this, but he says, that sounds right, send him over here. So I spent my 2 years in the military reading the news on television and playing records on the radio. And that was the beginning of what we do now. You know?
That's how broadcasting really started for you.
Yeah.
So it's my understanding that neither of you grew up listening to this style of music? I mean, especially you can. I mean, Jean, your father was a Baptist preacher.
Yes, he was a Southern Baptist preacher, but we really didn't have Southern gospel music. Some gospel songs, some hymns, but back when I was growing up, the Southern gospel music as we know it today would have been more in the Pentecostal churches, not so much in the Baptist churches. And so in some cases it was foreign, a little foreign to me, but and definitely not for Ken. And the way that we were kind of introduced to it is that we had a musical theater in Warwick, Rhode Island that Ken and I used to like to go to, and we happened to get tickets to a Statler Brothers concert. And we went to see the Statler Brothers, and at the end of their concert, they did the gospel songs. And we fell in love with them, and it was just shortly after that Bill Gaither was doing a homecoming series up in Worcester, Massachusetts, and you can hear that Ken's phone going off. So we went up there and just kind of got immersed in the music. We liked it, and I was a choir director at a church, so I started ordering choral music that really was Southern gospel music, some Mike Speck's cantatas and things like that. And the choir just ate it up. They loved it. And so that started what we were doing with Southern gospel. And then Ken continued it on with promotions.
So when you guys met and Ken was a teacher, what was the transition from where he decided that he wants to get back into his broadcasting and doing it with Southern gospel music?
Well,
when you guys met and Ken was a teacher, what was the transition from where he decided that he wants to get back into his broadcasting and doing it with Southern gospel music?
Well, that really happened after when I retired. I got back into television. One of the kids that had been on the radio station at the high school, a lot of them went on to work in radio and television. And I had been retired just a little while, and I got a phone call from a former student who was now working at Channel 6 in Providence and wanted to know if I wanted to come and work there part-time. So I did. So I got back into it, that way. We started the television show in Rhode Island of our own. Rhode Island had in those days, there were several local cable companies in Rhode Island, instead of like it is today where it's mainly a few big companies. There were all these, each town had its own little cable company, and they were all hooked together by microwave, and they had a channel that was devoted to religious broadcasting, and if you produced a show, they would put it on there for free, and it would run statewide. So we got back into it that way and used that show to promote the groups that we were having to come up to sing at the church, and that's how we got back into that. So the show that we do now is technically not a full-time job, although it's a lot of hours. But
well, I mean, as you two have known, since you're here talking to me, you know that I've started my own show, and this is just the second episode. So I can understand that there be some difficulties, things that come up. For example, I record this out of my bedroom. I'm sitting in my bedroom right now, and I understand you two are in your studio.
Yes.
And I mean, for me personally, my studio, I just went to Lowe's and bought some wallboard and screwed it into my drywall, and I use on my laptop and my iPhone for the. I've even rigged up my own home-made teleprompter using my phone and my Apple TV, and it's a long story. But so my biggest issue right now is just time and money. But you two have been doing this for how long has the show been going?
I think I've said 15 years for the past 3 years, but more than 15 years. Let's just put it there.
15 years plus.
15 years plus, that's right.